So this is Fred. Fred's an Irish national who's been living in Amsterdam, you might know the city because we're here, for about 10 years. And he's currently a global payroll manager. He's been in the global payroll world for around 15 years. He, like most of us, probably roll into payroll and has an intent to never roll out of payroll anymore. And now he is a global payroll manager of a manufacturing company. He has around 30 countries under his belt, 20,000 employees. He has around 5 countries, which represents 15,000 of those employees. And then all the other countries represent, well, you're the math guys here, 5,000 employees. And he loves his payroll job, I think like most of us do. And we've planned this specifically on the 5th of October because this should be relatively downtime for all of you. Unless you're running a weekly payroll. Who still runs a weekly payroll? You do. Oh, well, kudos to you for being here. When is your pay date? The 10th. The 10th. Okay, so you have plenty of time.
Of course.
Okay. All right. Otherwise, we have tools for you prepare. Okay, so he loves payroll. He really loves it, and he's sure that this is his career for life. When you speak of life, this is his actual life. So payroll is super important to him, but his wife, who's by the way an artist who can sing very well, and you might want to ask Angelique, our beloved Angelique sits there, she tries to hide, but she will not hide because she can sing beautifully. She's not going to sing tonight, but maybe if you ask her politely, she might. And they have 3 kids, different ages. So Tobias of 15, Jan of 10, and little Annie of 3. And he loves being around them, but as we all know, with a demanding job like payroll, sometimes it's difficult. I don't want to turn this into a sob story, but it's maybe a little bit. Because he must find a balance between his hard work around his Apple MacBook, working across all those different time zones, making sure everybody gets paid, and spending time with little Jan, Tobias, and Annie. If you're wondering, that's not the name of my kids. I rehearsed Tobias, Annie, and Jan. My wife was asking, why do you say all these names? I said, well, I'm not doing a speech.
It's my other family.
It's my other family, exactly. Yeah. In Amsterdam. No, don't get any ideas. But he wants to spend sufficient time there, and he finds it a tricky balance. And when he then finally gets some rest, you might find yourself like this when you're on paydays. Just like our friend Fred, who, believe it or not, has everything under control, but he does sometimes have some anxieties. Because he does want to spend sufficient time with his family. He wants to spend sufficient time with his team, that by the way spans across the globe, and everyone working in global payroll knows time zones is maybe one of the hardest challenges within global payroll, because you need to be, and you want to be there for everyone, but there's only 24 hours in a day. And it's morning somewhere else than where it's for you evening, so it's difficult. But what does a payroll person do? They don't count sheep, he counts time zones, and finally he does go to sleep. And this is Fred in his office. It's his home office, by the way, because who works in an office nowadays? Sorry, who works in an office nowadays? Okay, great. Is it hybrid or like full-time? Hybrid. Hybrid. Okay, that's a recurring theme, hybrid. That's a clip for everyone. Okay, so he has his little office. Of course, he has his payroll calendar on the wall. Right? We have all kind of digital tools, but who doesn't love printing a payroll calendar? I did always print the payroll calendar. He does have his time zones because that's sometimes difficult with scheduling meetings. And of course, he has some music on, and this time he hears Mark Knopfler shout about money for nothing. Well, he knows money doesn't come for nothing. So he has many Zoom meetings. He tries to crack Excel spreadsheet, and he has another nasty email of an employee who states that they pay too much income taxes. And the only typical response he could say, please vote for a demotion so you'll earn less, therefore you'll pay less taxes. Let me do the tax calculations for you. But still, he thinks about Fred and then another Fred that you might see there. So he's thinking of how can I actually break free from all of this. He sees himself on a couch with a latte macchiato, relaxed on paydays with his MacBook on his lap. He looks outside and thinks, geez, not only is my team wonderful, my balance in life is wonderful. He doesn't really want to work all those crazy hours, he just wants a normal life with a great job, keeping everybody happy. So he thinks about, how will I get to that space? Now, I'm not going to tell you now that you need Payzaar. So it's not going to turn into a sales pitch. Really, it's not. If you're afraid of it, I'm not going to tell you you need Payzaar. That's what Mark's going to say in the Netherlands. Yeah?
Before you leave.
Yeah. So that's Mark's part. Right, Mark?
Yeah. Everyone needs to be.
So he feels he's a little bit stuck in his paradigm and always underlying assumptions, as we do within global payroll, not just Fred. Fred should be someone you could relate to, I hope, otherwise my story makes no sense at all. So by now I hope that Fred resonates a little bit. And he's faced this through every step of his career. He needs to crack on, accept his situation, accept manual workarounds, because you need to pay, right? You don't have time in between pay dates to just sit down and, okay, let's do it differently. And HR said, yes, tell me what you need, but when I'll deliver it to you. Said no one ever within the HR department. So they're always the last to know about new countries or new initiatives or new benefits that have actually already been published in the intranet, and you still need to find out the taxability and the pay code. Oh, this brings back memories. So a wall starts to build between Fred and utopian Fred on the right. And when I say a wall starts to build, it's really a wall starts to build. So not only does he need to accept the situation, the only one-size-fits-all is the only option that's forced upon him, not by himself or by choice, because that's why the decision makers think, oh yeah, I said that one webinar, there's this one thing that will solve everything for you, just like, for instance, Workday or SuccessFactors have solved all your data input problems. Right? You don't need any manual workarounds, or I see Renier, my beloved colleague, who runs 10 Workday reports per payroll, if I recall, for Zoom. Yeah. So yeah, Workday, fantastic system from a payroll perspective. Said no one ever. So he has outsourced all of his payrolls, because that's how organically his manufacturing payroll grew. But now, as you remember, he has 5 countries with 15,000 employees. He still has an outsourced model because there's a one-size-fits-all. He starts thinking, geez, is it really the best way to run a payroll of 5,000 employees and outsource it totally? But then there was this one-size-fits-all thing in the head of the decision maker. So he's stuck between global needs and unfitting design principles. The one-size-fits-all, one vendor, one throat to choke, or he in reality notices it's one big mess to manage. I feel for Fred. And then Fred also has an ambition to globalize and standardize his processes. But of course, what everybody says is, yeah, I'm a little bit different in France. I don't look at you specifically, Pierre. Sorry. The same goes to France or whatever country. Everybody says, yeah, it's great global, but I'm just different. The culture's different, the timelines are different. Not really true. But then again, in Fred's situation, he has a business where the local people have quite a high say. They have a lot of empowerment because the business is fairly run locally. So what do you get into? You get into a conversation just like Fred with his local leaders who say, hey, I have this great idea, we need to standardize, it will save all of this work, and then, yeah, we're not going to do it. Why not? Because we've always done it this way. So again, Fred is a little bit stuck where he is too local to standardize from the local HR perspective. He cannot localize in a way that he wants to, and he cannot get the resources or approval to bring payroll back in-house because he needs to accept the situation. The situation is one size fits all, and everybody is too local to standardize. Now, we didn't see a picture here where Fred becomes more and more unhappy because that really made it into a sad story. But Fred is also feeling like he's working for the vendor. Now, there are some vendors here. It's not about you, it's about all the other vendors. Okay? It's all the other vendors that are like that. Not you guys. Totally not you. But he does sometimes struggle to feel like the customer and more like someone who needs to kind of fit into the provider model because that's the way that the business is run. But why can't we truly partner together? Perhaps he doesn't have the right partner, or Fred, who's kind of a forward-thinking person who does look at the man in the mirror. I think we're at count 5 now. But he does say, well, is it really just my way, or should I maybe actually look at the highway? sometimes we do need to wonder, because sometimes we do ask vendors to really just fit into Fred's model. And Fred might also think, well, maybe the vendor who has built his core business around payroll and his process actually has some good ideas that I could adapt. So Fred is a little bit stuck in between, I feel like I work for the vendor, but maybe actually the highway, which has a nice Ferrari on it, might also work for him. So he struggles a little bit, so why not glance at the highway? And maybe Fred is also a little bit stuck in his own assumptions. And as you can see by now, he cannot really see his utopian self anymore because the wall is starting to build. 4 way up, 4 stories up already. All of these assumptions within global or local or multi-country payroll. I need to accept my situation. One size fits all is the only option. We're too local to standardize, and it feels like I work for the vendor. I just want to pause for a second. Do any of these resonate for anyone in the room? If only one person raises their hand, I'll be happy. Ah, okay. Great. Oh, for you guys, this doesn't. No? Oh, okay, it does resonate. Phew. Okay, great. Otherwise, it's 17 years of my life working in global payroll spoiled down the drain. Yeah. Okay. Good. So there's another one. Oh, this one is really what I love. All the promises around cloud. And we're a native cloud solution as well, but we're not pretentious enough to say we'll solve everything for you, because we still need some other people and data sources for that. So when there was this great HCM implementation, who's implemented Workday? Who's implemented SuccessFactors? Good. And the rest? Other HR systems. Who has always data in one HR system that they need to run payroll for? Yeah. That's kind of the problem that Fred also faces. But still, he now needs budget to make sure the data from his time and attendance system, which, by the way, every local HR team, because he has a local business, is allowed to choose himself, because they're unique. So he has different local HR systems. And benefits, yeah. Who deals with eco vouchers in Belgium? Who deals with vouchers in Finland? Don't tell me there's one HCM system to run payroll. You'll go to Edenred, update the systems. Who does? Okay, the story is endless, but there is no one cloud system to harmonize all the 10 data sources. And Rainier, I thought about you when we said 10 data sources. Huh? It's the pain we felt, and you still feel. Sorry, I left you with that pain. Sorry?
That's only Workday.
That's only Workday.
All the other input sources.
Okay, yeah, so it's like a low number, 10. Yeah.
How much is it total out of curiosity? Do you know?
Sorry?
Do you know how many data sources outside of Workday you have in total?
Workday, E-Trade for equity.
Excellent.
And the rest is ticket service now, huh?
Yeah.
Great system service now. We have a service now that's great system. Great. Best ticket system ever. It's great.
We'll give some cards.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Did I say service now is great? Service now is great. But it's true, everybody works with all kinds of different sources, right? And the last resort is just send a ticket, which is already an improvement from just send an email. Right? Send an email, oh, was it cut off again? No. Yeah, that's why there's calendars on the wall, that's why we send these emails, just, okay, great. But he does wonder, if it is the state of cloud and data that he needs to fight, so does he need to go to HR and maybe request changes, or maybe start owning it himself, or maybe he just accepts that payroll will always be this way, that there won't be one source system that feeds his data. Maybe he just acknowledges and just gives in, which is a great song, by the way, Florence and the Machine. When are you giving up? When are you giving in? So he just give in into a situation where he can't harmonize all the data sources, and that's just fine. Maybe that's the state where he needs to be in. But then you see there's still a white space above this wall, so there's another assumption. I'll just leave this here for a second. Excel. So he's a forward-thinking payroll professional, but he still finds himself and his team working in Excel, right? If we look at any payroll system, we give a lot of demos, and at some point you feel this question boiling up, but it's not being asked, and at some point, and then I just say, yes, you can export to Excel. sigh of relief with any demo. We're proud, we're cloud, we're native, we interact, export to Excel. Okay, so Fred would also ask this question, but Fred would probably, he's a little bit Dutch, and I would ask you after 1 minute, okay, it's fine. Is export to Excel there? Yeah? Okay, tick the box. Okay, but he does, in principle, acknowledge that he shouldn't need Excel. Because he knows that whenever you put it into Excel, it becomes a potential data security risk. Because once you put it to Excel, it sits somewhere. It sits on someone's drive. It sits on someone's local folder of a laptop that he doesn't always protect, I think. Or it's easy to email to someone. So he does acknowledge that it needs to do something with Excel. But while we currently, it doesn't feel like the assumption is true that you can't do with Excel. I've seen a post at some point by someone who said Excel is in the graveyard, on a gravestone. I don't believe we will ever do without Excel. But we could think of limiting the usage of Excel. Fred thinks so too. But Fred, like anyone, sometimes has an epiphany. He has a little light bulb. So what if a change is forced? Or better said, as he's born in November, what if he is the scorpion with that wind of change? What if he's actually empowering himself? Seven. It's a thing. No, but true. Like, I've also been a global payroll manager, and I've failed sometimes miserably in forcing a change that I should have forced. But maybe, and I feel this boiling up, maybe it's time for a paradigm shift in global payroll. Maybe we almost rise up and say enough is enough, we're going to actually solve this, we're going to do something to change it. And Bart has built the whole business around this paradigm shift, which is very successful, because there is a lot of momentum out there. Fred, nobody knows it, but Fred started this revolution. Because I'm talking on past tense for Fred. Fred already knew this a couple of years ago, but he was feeling a little bit alone. But still, he was a scorpion, and he's got a sting. He's got a sting at the police. He's got a sting at that wall that forces him to not see his utopia himself, or not reach his end goal. And his end goal is, he wants to break free. Fred wants to break free. So he pulls up his sleeve, which is more of a Rotterdam, by the way, expression. They will roll up their sleeves. That's also why they're currently better than Ajax. Did you really say that? I'm sorry, it's so hard to admit, but they're currently better than Ajax. He pulls up the hammer and he says, what if I would try to break down the wall? What if utopia is actually within reach? And what if he is not just another brick on the wall? I think Fred can do it. And if Fred can do it, you guys can do it. So let's think about what Fred can do. Excel actually becomes an option. He knows it's a great transition. So Renier, you're there again, you're in my side. We were once forced to change. You need to stop with Excel, you need to move to Google Sheets. You could submit changes late after cutoff, that's all fine, but don't ask me to switch from Microsoft Excel to Google Sheets in a month. And we did it, no, okay. So it becomes an option, not a necessity, but because true, if you do have a platform or a process that kind of removes Excel or manual inputs, or you don't need to pull your data to Excel to visualize what you mean, that already removes maybe 30-40% of your downloads to Excel. He knows, and he's practical enough to know that sometimes he and his teams and his stakeholders still need Excel because they simply must. So let's also break with that paradigm shift that at the other side, payroll can't do with Excel, can't do without Excel, but also there is actually a way to limit Excel. And Fred knows that, so that's kind of a paradigm shift for the payroll professionals that I would plead to you guys when you look in the mirror and say, could I really do without that download to Excel? Fred could. So Fred could, and I'm pretty sure you can do that as well. This is the data, right? He understands that although he wants it, he really cannot influence the HRIT roadmap. Whether he reports into finance, he, by the way, reports into HR, he really doesn't have the say to influence the HCF roadmap or to make sure that the payroll effective change interface is actually effective, right, the PG. He does have struggles to make sure that his data is in a way that he can process it. So he thinks, I'm going to solve it myself. I'm gonna make sure that I can take any data that anyone sends me in any format, and I'll make sure I'll make it readily processable for payroll. And that kind of takes the angle for him out of his day-to-day stuff, because he's gonna own his own landscape. There was an analogy once by, nobody worked at Shell here, I worked at Shell, so I can say her, Olu Adalaja, wonderful. She made an analogy once of a bus, and I think I said it in one of the webinars. She says, there's a bus that goes from A to B. The one that puts the data in the bus, that's fine. I will say to you what kind of tires and wheels the bus will have. You throw your data in there. I'll make sure it gets to B, and then I'll take care of it. And there's a split between HR and payroll. We can talk a little bit later about what that means actually with a beer and a bitterball later. But he does feel like he can solve the data stuff himself. And I think he can actually pull that off as well, because he will have a system or a platform that can do that, so he doesn't need to go back to all of these local HR folks that they need to change. The only thing he says, I need your data by X date, you set it in a format that you want. So we do have some vendors here. Well, vendors, it sounds like a vending machine. We also need to think about something, a different term than vendors. And actually Fred thought about that, which are partners. Which sounds a lot better than a vendor, right? As if it's your vending machine pays for Italy, with €2. So he welcomes the ideas of vendors, wouldn't that be nice, of partners, and finds a balance between the as-is and the to-be state, because he almost sees it like a marriage. Because whoever did a payroll provider switch, was it easy? Was it a breeze? No, it's difficult. It's really difficult. Whether it's not just about Payzaar, it's about whatever provider. If you do a provider switch, it's difficult. It can be done because everybody's done it, you've done it, but it's never easy. Therefore, I used to say, and Fred said the same thing because Fred's a little bit like me because I wrote Fred, is that he marries to a provider, and therefore the only last resort is a divorce. But before that, he goes into a lot of marriage counseling. He needs to change a little bit, his partners need to change a little bit, because in the end, most of the vendors, of course not Payzaar, we're uniquely different, so we're uniquely different. All the other vendors, in the end, similarly look like each other. However, there are great nuances. So Fred now knows I need to partner with my vendor. I do not just need to throw my shoebox over to a vendor, because otherwise they will never become a partner. So he needs to find the best set of vendors to manage his services and his technology. Fred's gonna break with the paradigm that the vendors only work, he works for the vendors. Now, too local to standardize. Who has ever heard that argument from local teams that they say, no, we're just a little bit different? Yeah, see, that's nothing, yeah. And when you drilled into it, were you actually that different? No. So can anyone share how they solved it? Because Fred says here like, oh, you can balance global and local. That's great, everybody can say that, but Fred doesn't really know how to do it. So is anyone brave enough to say how they have overcome the I am too local challenge and actually convince them to move to a more standard process or input? No?
Well, it depends on what subject. Some subjects I think are impossible to merge. But you can't decide on bank holidays, European bank holidays.
Yeah.
They are different per country and will always be. So, but I think if you go over what the minimum per country is, if you wanna talk on holidays, just go above and beyond. Say the minimum is 20, but somewhere else 25. I'll make it 30 European.
Thanks for chipping in. Yeah. No way to mouse.
Yeah, I will take over your meetings.
No, do share, Mark.
No, my point of view is, I'd like to look at these procedures in tiers. You know, the example I always give is, think about maternity leave. Very specific local everywhere, and there's so many differences. But it starts with somebody being pregnant. That's tier 1 or tier 0.
It's the same everywhere.
It's the same everywhere. And second is, it starts with somebody's going to leave at a certain point and going to return at a certain point. So that's the same, And then the same thing is, when they really leave or when they really return is also the same everywhere. So I like to think about the process within the process and say, what of this process is standard and what of this process is non-standard, and then deal with it that way. And then you can really specifically say, for this particular item that we need to take care of in, for example, maternity leave, I have a partner locally, or I have somebody locally who will take care of it. But the rest, I can take care of. It's data, it's process, it's following a global standard. So it's not about whether you can standardize maternity leave everywhere, it's about can you standardize the process of maternity leave.
Exactly, because there's a start, there's a form, there's an endpoint, those differences, but in ownership and the total process flow would be the same. Yeah.
And so in that case, you could have the lady or the person being pregnant requesting for the leave centrally. Somebody can put the data in, can follow up on it, and make sure that the documentation is there. But then somebody locally needs to make sure they send it out to the authorities or to whatever is needed to make it a full-blown process. So that's how I look at it.
Fred has listened. Fred's got to find a balance. Thanks. Yeah, the one-size-fits-all is the only option. That's something that I think a lot of us have faced with before, where you wanted to choose a vendor. And hybrid is, for me, the one-size-fits-all. I alluded to it. Because there just isn't a global payroll provider that can provide Fred both his services and his tech. That's just the way it is. Also, Payzaar cannot provide everything for every country. Fred has 30 countries, if you remember, 5 very large countries. He wants to bring payroll in-house. That alone requires a specific payroll engineer, and then has 25 countries where he only has 5,000 employees. In some countries, he only has 10 to 15 employees. He needs a completely different service because HR doesn't know anything about the local employment rules and regulations. So he needs a little bit more of a service like a business process outsourcing, where he might need a local vendor to produce employment contracts or help them with severance pay. Whereas his larger countries, he could do with a traditional managed service because he has sufficient knowledge in-house. He has trained his team how to review those payslips and those local nuances, but he doesn't want to produce payroll himself because he doesn't have the economies of scale. So therefore he plots out his whole entire landscape, and he understands that yes, hybrid is the one-size-fits-all because payroll is still fairly hyper-local. Right? They've tried to standardize a lot within Europe, but they've stayed away from the actual rules. Yes, there is a convention that determines where you are socially insured, but that's about it. So hybrid is the one-size-fits-all. And I've made one mistake that I regret across my career, that I needed and had to deal with that, where we had a great set of local vendors at a certain shoe company where we worked for, which worked perfectly. They're very comfortable. And nobody admits that they wear them Crocs. Okay, yeah. Okay. I should have worn my Crocs today. Just be a proud Crocs of gibbets on it. It takes a real man to wear Crocs. Okay, anyway, different conversation. We can talk about Crocs all day long. But we had a great set of vendors. I think we had like 11, 12 vendors. They all worked perfectly. But what we missed was a kind of central type of technology. The GL files we didn't really have created. So what we did, we ripped out all of those countries. Well, actually, I need you. Oh, I need you. I owe you a lot of. Yeah, okay. Ripped out all the countries to then move to, yes, there was a nice central technology, but the vendors weren't really dealing with it. So that's one of the mistakes that I made. After that, I knew hybrid is the one-size-fits-all. Sometimes it fits, right? That type of model might have fit for me when I worked, for instance, at Shell, where we had those type of vendors where it was very structured. We had sufficient funds to do everything. It was great to have one vendor for a certain region, process 30 countries. It worked like a charm. But that's why you need to look at all of this in their specific context, and you typically end up with a hybrid approach within global payroll. So with a balance between outsourced, different levels of outsourcing, in-house, and the best set of different vendors. Now, the last one, of course, is that he needs to accept his situation. I think this is my main message for you all today, is that I think it's great that everybody always accepts the situation, crack on. Employees don't know anything about everything you need to deal with. to make sure they get paid. Still they complain. But they don't know all the pain you need to go through. But I think we're now at a state in global payroll where the tools are there, ours and other vendors. There are consultancy companies, there's a lot of tools out there, so you have choices to challenge your own status quo and break free. It really becomes an option to accept your situation and not a necessity. I think that's one of the main messages I would want to leave you with today. Because there is a way to challenge the status quo, and I know some of you are working on business cases to make changes. You're all brave enough to do that, and I think also what COVID has, well, it's done a lot of horrible things, but what it showed us is that payroll is fairly mission critical. And that we can really move from a in-person model to deliver remotely. Right? We've done that. We've kept the world going, we've kept the world paid. All of those job retention schemes across the world we've implemented. So I think it's pretty clear that we're starting to become fairly mission critical. So he thinks, why should I wait any longer before demanding the best for myself and for my team? So he breaks with the status quo, and he breaks free, and I encourage you to also break free, because you want to see what a broken, free payroll person looks like. Now that's a Fred you want to look at. This is Fred with his sleeves rolled up. He has his tie. I'm not sure why he has a tie when he works at home, but he's maybe just a fashionable guy wearing Crocs underneath. You can't see it in the Zoom meetings. You only see this. So we only see Fred this way. But Fred has really broken free. He has dealt with this paradigm shift, and he has forced a paradigm shift some years ago. That's why we are all here rethinking payroll. So now he goes, he tells his family, I'm there again. Okay, he still needs to get the business case approved, but that's a minor detail. He gets the stakeholders and he goes and tells them. So a paradigm shift is put in motion. He's really broken free. And of course, you would have seen that he has Freddie Mercury on the wall. So he starts singing, Don't Stop Me Now. And I would encourage you to also break free. So I ask you, do you have a Fred within you? Just think about the question and tell me where we go network. So I think with that, that's kind of the end of mine, or actually Fred's story. So open for any questions from anyone before we move into maybe a needed refreshment. And then we mingle a bit. And then the next one is Ilonka, I think. So thanks for listening and engaging.